Let's dive right in. Look, for decades, you and I worked in an era where information was just scarce. Finding the right data was hard, it took forever, and honestly, a massive chunk of our professional value was simply tied up in being the person who could actually track down the facts. Fast forward to today, and AI has made answers practically free. You ask a chatbot a ridiculously complex question, and boom, you get a beautifully polished answer in seconds. It feels a little bit like magic, doesn't it?
But here's where things get super interesting. Because answers are now just everywhere, this sudden abundance has created a totally new, much harder crisis for professionals. You see, the challenge of our time is no longer finding information. That part is solved. The real bottleneck now? Knowing what actually deserves to be believed. I mean, when every single answer sounds incredibly authoritative, how do you know which one is actually right?
And that perfectly captures the central thesis of our explainer today. In this totally new paradigm, your professional value is fundamentally shifted. It has moved entirely away from simply searching for data to exercising critical judgment. Seriously, anyone can generate a fluent summary today, we've all seen them, but the professionals who actually win are the ones evaluating the evidence and owning the final call. Section 1, prompting is not a workflow. To really get to that level of judgment, we've got to rethink some of our daily habits. So let me ask you this. Why is starting with a blank AI chatbot often the absolute worst first step you can take? Opening ChatGPT and just typing in a complex question feels highly efficient, right? But let's be honest, by doing that, you're actually quietly poisoning your own analysis. If you kick things off by basically saying, hey, find evidence that supports this decision, you're literally inviting the AI to strengthen an existing narrative and completely hide any uncertainty. It just smooths over all the messy contradictions to give you this clean, confident, and potentially completely wrong story. So the absolute crucial point here is understanding the difference between a prompt and a workflow. They are not the same thing. A prompt is just a request. It generates fast answers. Having a huge collection of prompts, that just makes you faster at doing basic, honestly sometimes mediocre work. But a workflow, now that is a system with built-in checkpoints that builds genuine confidence. A workflow is what actually elevates your research to a professional, completely defensible standard.
Which brings us to what I like to call the constitution of modern research. Think first, prompt second, verify always. We really need to start framing AI not as this magical oracle that replaces our decision-making, but as a thinking partner that extends our exploration. AI is fantastic at accelerating execution. Absolutely. But it cannot and should not decide what actually gets executed.
Section 2. The Grounded Research System. Let's talk about how we actually put this into practice. Let me introduce the Grounded Research OS. Now, please don't think of this as just another manual of software instructions or a list of prompts. Think of it as a cohesive, professional operating system designed specifically to prevent those embarrassing, costly mistakes in your research.
Let's walk through the first few phases of this system, and notice this starts before AI is even allowed in the room. Stage 1 is purpose. You have to define the decision you're actually trying to improve, which completely prevents you from wasting time on meaningless, overly broad research. Stage 2 is planning. This is where you write a brief and define your evidence standards before you ever start typing, and that completely prevents random, unfocused prompting. Then, stage 3 is gathering evidence. You collect and triage credible sources yourself. Doing this creates a hard ceiling of quality that literally prevents those embarrassing AI hallucinations we all dread later on. Okay, so once your rock-solid evidence is gathered, we hit stage 4, analysis. This is where we finally use AI, but we use it to extract and organize comparable claims. Notice I said extract, not summarize. This is absolutely crucial because it prevents you from falling into the trap of just passively accepting fluent AI summaries. From there, we move to stage 5, which is reasoning. Here, you weigh the trade-offs, test alternative theories, and create true understanding. It forces all that hidden disagreement and those alternative explanations right out into the open, making any uncertainty totally visible. And finally, we get to the wrap-up stages. Stage 6 is verification, where you trace critical claims all the way back to their original sources to build unbreakable trust. Stage 7 is communication, which is delivering the decision but with the uncertainty clearly mapped out so your team can actually take action. And stage 8 is reflection, where you bank what you learn to create reusable knowledge for next time. What's absolutely vital here, and I cannot stress this enough, is that tracing claims to originals, making uncertainty visible, and banking that learned knowledge, those are strictly human responsibilities.
Section 3. Orchestrating your AI ecosystem. So we have the operating system. Now let's talk about execution.
Intelligent professionals know better than to expect a single AI model to do everything flawlessly. Inside this larger operating system runs a core thinking engine that we call the grounded research loop. It's a continuous engine. Question, ground, reason, challenge, and decide. This loop is constantly running, constantly stress testing your evidence and challenging your assumptions. And to run this loop effectively, you're going to need different instruments.
I want you to think of yourself kind of like a conductor leading an orchestra. You wouldn't use a drum to play a violin solo, right? In the same way, Perplexity absolutely excels at discovering sources to gather. NotebookLM is totally unmatched for grounded source analysis because every single claim traces directly back to a passage in the documents you uploaded. Claude, it's brilliant at deep reasoning and stress testing your synthesis. ChatGPT is just fantastic at organizing, drafting, and communicating those ideas back to your audience. And Gemini seamlessly integrates all this research right into your wider workspace ecosystem. Every single tool has a highly specific role, and importantly, none of them replace your overall workflow.
Section 4. The human thinking partner. This brings us right back to the single most critical component of this entire system.
That component is you, the human thinking partner. Look, whether you are doing a clinical evidence review in healthcare, putting together a policy brief in government, writing an investigative story in journalism, or making a massive business strategy decision in consulting, the rigorous thinking stack remains exactly the same, only the evidence changes. And this is exactly why your role is completely irreplaceable. Every current AI model can hallucinate. We all know they can confidently, smoothly lie with absolute authority. They all have training cutoffs. They all lack original, primary evidence. But most importantly, AI bears absolutely zero professional liability. The AI said so is just not a defense you can use with your boss, your clients, or your patients. You, the human, must always own the critical judgment, the verification, and the final call.
So, what does this all mean for us? AI will continue getting better at generating answers. That's a given. But the people who create the most value will be those who ask better questions, evaluate evidence more carefully, and exercise better judgment. That is exactly what the Grounded Research OS is designed to protect. The future belongs not to people who use AI the most, but to those who know when to trust it and when not.